Hi, my name's Greenop, and like Nick said, I've worked with him on, I think, 2 projects so far. And like you mentioned, there's another one that we're hoping to get going soon. And this is the second one, and I have a confession to start with. I'm not really, and my background isn't in children and young people. I'm most definitely, I consider myself to be someone who, my main expertise is with older people. So I don't stand here today as some expert in this specific field, but I am someone who is definitely learning about working with children and young people. And this project that I want to share with you today, very briefly, is part of that process for me. And hopefully, I hope there will be 1 or 2 little things that you may be able to pick up and use. And what I want to talk about is a mentor scheme in North Wales that was working with children and young people on a very deprived estate. It's one of the biggest estates in the UK, 12,500 people, extremely deprived, and according to the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation, a recent report, it experiences an awful lot of very troubling issues that you might say are quite typical of most deprived areas, but they are particularly severe in this town, which I've imaginatively referred to as Welsh Town for the sake of anonymity. And as you'd expect in a place like this, it is very often the children and the young people who suffer most, isn't it? And the recent report, again, which I've left out so you can't trace it, has identified specific issues that are affecting the young people, and identified things like low aspirations, a lack of role models, insufficient organised activities, and a serious need to ignite the interest of the young people. And that's the context. And in a sense, if there is an ideal context for a mentor program, then this is it. Because mentors aim at developing, in this particular project, what they refer to as a professional friendship through structured activities through which competence and character is developed. So it's not the answer to all the problems, and it certainly doesn't deal directly with the structural issues that people experience in this particular community. The idea is that it is a way of building the resilience of the children who the mentors engage with. Just a little bit about those particular participants that we were engaged with. They were excluded from the community. In a sense, the community is itself marginalised, and you imagine, and within that community there are groups of children who are again further marginalised. So we are talking about the so-called hard to reach, if you like, and they were marginalised through issues like bullying and racism, low self-esteem, and some of the specific issues that the young people I spoke to, particularly were dealing with things like anger management, educational attendance, medical diagnoses like ADHD and Asperger's syndrome, and also nutrition, poor nutrition and diet, and so on. In terms of what the evidence for and against mentoring, it is actually quite a mixed bag if you look at the literature, and most of the positive outcomes that you find is in the so-called grey literature, and it's not really very credible, I have to say. And you have anything from a range of, for example, stuff around reoffending. There are quite absurd claims that the Home Office often latch on to, talking about 77% reductions in reoffending, but then you'll find something else which will talk about only very minuscule effects. But there are there are also a lot of, in the more credible journals, if you like, they are far more cautious and even suggest that mentor schemes can in fact make things worse because they very often are dealing with people at the margins, people who have been let down, people who live in chaotic circumstances. There is this attitude that we have, isn't it, that we go into a situation, but if we withdraw, then you actually leave them worse off. You're better off not engaging whatsoever, is basically what the research seems to say, than go in and come back and leave them high and dry, because it just leaves them with even, it just complicates the problems even more, lets them down, and so on. So the evidence isn't actually that great in support of mentor schemes. In terms of our particular approach to this particular project, we took a participatory approach and basically just aimed at maximising insofar as you can with the what were young people who were not actually very interested in participating, but trying to maximise their involvement, which is what I will share with you a little bit later. It's essentially concerned with generating dialogical data, working with your classic participatory cliche, working with participants rather than working on participants. It was a small study, as you can see, but it did engage with everybody that we thought was important, including carers, the mentors themselves, and I'll talk a little bit about the mentees, which is why we're here this morning. And also some case studies were kind of presented through documentary evidence. That wasn't meant to happen. A little bit of a rationale, I suppose, in terms of how I sought to engage with these young people, and it was effectively just using what's referred to as draw and talk. And the idea is that basically it's not so much that the artifact itself, the thing, whether it's a picture or an object or whatever it is that you might be doing with the young people, it's what goes on around that. So basically, how I engaged with these young people was just basically doing something with them. I did have some lovely pictures that we've taken out, doing something with them and talking with them, often about something that might be totally irrelevant, and we had a lot of fun. I did take my camera in, a very expensive camera, and it was actually, even though I was petrified that they'd break it and they were throwing it round, but they were all taking photos. It broke the ice. They were all taking photos of each other and photos of me and other mentors, and so that broke the ice, and then we went into these activities. We engaged with activities. There was stuff like using Lego, drawing pictures, using clay. And one thing I would say, just by way of caution, whereas the Lego thing seemed like a great idea, we used the metaphor of transport. So we talked a lot about transport, what transport they like, and getting them to build something. And because we thought that would capture their journey quite nicely as a metaphor. And it did, but I would caution you about using Lego, because in your mind you think, yes, I can build this great ship or whatever that is, but it's actually really, really difficult. If you're working with 7, 8, 9-year-olds especially, they'll spend, as one child did, spent 55 minutes trying to put this thing together, then looking at it and throwing it against the wall. Everything splashes, and then he kind of scribbles down a drawing, and that was him done. But that was almost irrelevant, because we talked a lot during that process. There were some findings. It wasn't just about that, but these findings drew mainly from the carers that I spoke to, the mentors that I spoke to, but were corroborated, and this is the main thing, through dialogue with the service users, and I'll come on to that. I don't want to focus on the findings, just about I do want to focus on the process really for us today. And that there are some of the final products, no Lego there. Actually, we've got one of my students here, and I don't know if he remembers, we did this activity with the social work students. I think they found the same with the Lego. Initially, you're kind of thinking, yeah, a bit of Lego, but no one actually produced anything, I think. So there were some outcomes in terms of what they, this is a car, they also did a spaceship, that's a smart car that somebody did, and a sports car, a motorbike, and so on. Just going back to the initial point, I don't want to big up something, I don't want to make more of this than is actually there, but there were one or two moments in the engagement with the young people that were kind of light bulb moments, and I'm not sure I even noticed them when we were doing this, but it was only on reflection that you kind of, when you're analysing the data that you've got. And this is one example, and the reason I use this example is, one, it does corroborate what other people were saying about the importance of trust and reliability in a relationship. But what I love about this is I think it demonstrates that we did actually get somewhere. That is, it's a 3 or even 4-way conversation. It's not, in a kind of straightforward interview situation where you ask a question and the person, adult or child, will very often give you the answer that you want, kind of thing, or the answer they think you want. But this was real. Remember, these are very disengaged young people. They didn't give us a chance in terms of actually getting anything useful from these. The mentors themselves said it just wouldn't work. It did work. We were in there for at least an hour or more, and this is an example of some of the conversation that happened. And what I love about it is it's almost like I'm just part of it, if you like. It's almost like by this point they've kind of forgotten that I'm there almost, and they all engage in the dialogue, which stresses the importance of reliability in terms of cars, as we were talking about there, and in terms of the mentor scheme itself, trust and reliability. And another very brief one. And again, this is kind of something that you could easily overlook, but it points to something extremely important, I think, in terms of moving, so having established the trust and reliability that is foundational in any relationship, but especially between a mentor and a mentee, and especially in the context where people are living in chaos, where all they've ever known is very poor attachments with the parents, they cannot trust people. And what I love here is, by the time we get to the end, there is this kind of defending, if you like, of the mentee. There is the possibility, which I'm kind of getting at, sometimes things are cancelled, sometimes things don't work out. Tell me about that. But I thought it was really interesting that whereas you might expect they would have every reason to get angry, these were people who struggled with anger, they actually are understanding. They've reached a point where they understand that adults can't always keep their promises, that sometimes things don't work, that actually they can get over it. They don't have to blame them. And I think that was actually a massive, it's a theme that came out with the other people, and it is a theme that came out, if you like, unintentionally, which I suppose is what this approach was all about, trying not to be too obvious about the kind of extracted information, which is very often how we go about research, isn't it? And recommendations, I only put that there because I suppose I wanted to show that it did have an outcome. It wasn't just about me going in and playing with kids. But that is really not the recommendation that I have really today. I think my recommendation for me and for you, for anyone who is interested in research with young people or with any people who are at the edges of society, is we need to try and think about doing things differently. We need to start with them, if you like. We need to turn the research upside down, if you like. Think about what works. Think about how do children interact with each other, and how can we use that in terms of building our research project or whatever it is. So we're very good at coming with methods, and we're very rigid about I do research this way, this way, or this way. I think we need to start actually listening to what way do children and young people do it, and starting there. What's been done? Can I leave that to you?
fantastic, a real insight into an exciting project there. I'd just like to introduce Professor Tony Long, who's Professor at Salford University, but is also a visiting Professor here at LJMU. He leads the CYP at Salford, which is a multi-professional children and families research centre with programmes and evaluation for services of families supporting parents. I'm sure he'll introduce himself much better than I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Slides up, okay?
I think so. Don't be fooled, I can break it even now. A little apology first. There are some really nice pictures in this presentation, but only very clever, very pure-minded and diligent people will be able to see them. There was a little problem with rules with using images that sponsors have allowed us to use, and we can't have them recorded. Okay, so if there's gaps, you know why you can't see the pictures. I'm very happy to be here. My main job is in the University of Salford, but it's great that I can have this visiting position here in another Northwest University that is also very clearly associated with practice and with the realities of what people in the population, in the community, are actually facing and trying to do something about that. I think that's really important, and it's part of the reason why I was happy to come and be associated with the people here and see how we can move on. I'm also grateful for having the opportunity to regale you with on one of my particular bugbears at the moment, and it fits in, I think, with what Daz has been saying and Nick. I did think for a minute that we'd gone in the wrong order and they were going to prove me wrong before I'd even said anything, but we'll see how that works out. Okay, so what I really want to do is put to you an argument that really we're forgetting about children and young people then and the impact on children and young people when we're providing services sometimes and when we're doing research. So I'm going to use one main study and one group of studies that we've done in recent times as examples of this, but really this is coming through from a set of 11 evaluations of different services for children and young people and families. The one thing they've all got in common is they were all multi-agency and they were all about chaotic families or families experiencing particular difficulties. Okay, so the studies are just a vehicle for my argument. So 2 selected programmes of research. I can't even see that screen. I don't know why I'm looking there. 2 selected programmes of research. One was a very large 4-year longitudinal evaluation of interventions for neglect. And the other was that I've picked out to talk about really was a series of 5 studies. Some of them were going on at the same time, but overall it took about 2.5 years. And that was to evaluate the impact of family intervention projects. Okay, so I may miss some things out so that we can keep to time. But if we talk about the neglect study first, one of the pictures that you might all be able to see is this picture. This was a child's bedroom in one of the projects that we were working with. Okay. The aims of this evaluation are there. I've grayed most of them out because the one that was really important, I think, was the one that's in white there, to deliver better outcomes for vulnerable children. Clearly, that was the most important thing that the project needed to achieve. So that's what we were going to be looking for, as well as all those other things. What happened? Well, we went to projects sites throughout the UK. And we were looking at what happened on assessment when children were referred for intervention where neglect was a problem, and what happened at the end, what was the outcome at the end. And one of the very helpful things that was available was a measuring tool. So that it was an instrument, it was a very large instrument, probably too large, that practitioners could take to a house. And through lots of different categories and subcategories, they could work with parents to say, well, let's have a look at what the children's bedrooms are like. Let's see what sort of food there is in the house. Let's see what the kids are being given for breakfast and so on and so forth. And through that, they could then work with parents to establish where the parenting was okay, where the parenting even might have been really good, but also where the parenting was of a standard that everybody would call neglect. Sometimes that was a very hard message for parents to hear. Very often, through using this instrument, it was easier for them to understand why that was the case. But look what happened. At the end of this 4-year project, what we'd found was that in 59% of cases, the concern about neglect was removed completely. Do you know, I was gobsmacked by that. You're looking at me like, yeah. In 60% of cases, where most people would give up and say that those children are never going to have a better life, may as well take them into care. In 60% of cases, almost, it was turned round and they went back to just being dealt with by normal services, by health visitors and nurseries and so on. That was fantastic. In another 9%, the neglect wasn't actually already occurring, but neglect was almost inevitable given the circumstances. So this was very often a young couple or a single mother on her own who had no experience of good parenting herself. There were additional problems very often, perhaps with learning difficulties or with substance misuse and so on. And it looked very clear that if you did nothing about it, the child was going to be neglected. And in all of those cases, neglect was prevented. And even the level of caring, which never actually had reached concern of neglect, was actually improved anyway. That's fantastic. In 32% of cases, there was remaining concern. There was still concern neglect was going on. But even in that, in about three-quarters of that group went into care. The children went into care. Finally, they should have been in care a long time ago. But that move was accelerated so that they went into care. And there is evidence that if you take children into care sooner rather than later, they do better. So it wasn't the outcome that we were looking for, but that was good. But 1/4 of that group, even the outcomes for them were improved. There was still work to be done, and they were handed back to other services to carry on. So a general message was, you can do a great deal about neglect and you can succeed, and that was a fantastic picture, far better than anybody had expected. In fact, if you look at it a different way, if you look at all the cases where concern about neglect was reduced, that was more than 3/4. That's fantastic. Given the history of work with neglect and the outcomes that you would expect, that is absolutely fantastic, wonderful. What made the difference? Early intervention made a difference. Going to the house, dealing with problems in the house made a huge difference. Building up a relationship with parents, and we've just heard that can be very difficult if you're dealing with people who are service resistant, who really don't have anything to do with statutory services and so on. Professionals won't get access. That was really important. People got into the house and dealt with the family in the house. Building the relationship there and then, gaining trust and so on. The next thing that's really important was to tackle that very difficult topic and say to parents, your care is neglectful. It would normally be wrapped up a little better than that, but that was the message that had to be got across, and that was very difficult. And finally, the families would have a host of problems. They'd be circling around their head like a big black cloud, and the practitioners really had to address all of those problems, or at least hold them all and work with some all the time, because if you're just working with one problem, disaster is happening behind you. So those are the things that happened. That's what actually worked. But when it came to looking at what was written, what was the evidence about those outcomes, we struggled. And in fact, we did workshops with the practitioners to change this. But to begin with, the evidence that was written down was in 3 groups. It was about the home, the child, and the parents. The red X's are where there was no recorded outcome, no evidence of the outcome. It was measured, and we could see from the measures that things had been successful, but what was being written, what was the evidence that was being provided that things were better? Well, we do very well when we talk about parents. there's lots of evidence about improvement with parents and what had gone on there. Most of the evidence was there about the home, but most of the evidence about what was happening to the children wasn't there. And that's not just this project, that's been in just about every evaluation we've done on services for families where children are at risk or their health is at risk and so on. Very common. So, can we all see this lovely picture? Can anybody not see this picture? Anybody want to admit they can't see the picture? Okay. Some of the issues that that typifies that are very common with other projects was the quality of recording. Quality of recording has always been a problem and will always be a problem across health, social care, education and everything. It's always a thing that we don't do as well. We record assessment, we assess people to death and record that very well. We tell people very clearly what we've done because we have to show that we've been busy and done what we're supposed to do. But recording the outcome is something that we very often don't do very well. When there's multiple children, very often we will talk about what's happened to the family and not talk about what's happened to individual children. And with neglect, for example, very often there's one child that's neglected and another child that is very well cared for. There's very little explicit analysis. This is what we've found, but what does it actually mean? What does it mean? So you've found that that's happening, we've found that there's a problem with school and so on, but what does it mean? Recording outcomes. So what was the impact on individual children? Don't know. The other studies, we don't need that really. The other studies were about evaluating multi-agency teams working to improve the lot of families that were in complete chaos and to improve the outcomes for children. All sorts of measures done, measuring what we can do, family interviews, meetings, events, all sorts to try to establish the change. And there was massive change. Domestic violence reduced by 74%, is it? Yeah, and so on. I'm going to go through quickly because I'm being waved at that we need to move on. Oh, sorry. Some of these things, only 1 out of 27 young women who were in the age where we're concerned about teenage and young pregnancy, only 1 out of 27 became pregnant in that time. That was a fantastic change. Substance misuse, more cases were identified, more people were engaging in treatment and so on. Housing, all 10 families that had been in arrears had been helped to get out of that and to sort out to secure the tenancy and so on. Children missing from home was addressed, children placed in care and so on. Everything was fantastic, but did any of that say what happened to the children? Well, the education stuff said they attended school. Okay. Finding out what happens to their attainment is rather more difficult. The problem is this: the families are the subject to commissions mostly. We're paid to do work with families. Most of the work we actually do is with parents. Parenting programs, very effective, certainly. And child outcomes are really very difficult to establish and to describe. So we're almost there. Why is this problem so common? Well, I think it's this. Central policy certainly is focused on intervention with parents for most things, in health, in social care, even in education sometimes. There is a rhetoric about family. We talk about family. In children's nursery, we talk about family-centred care. In social care, we talk about family services, and so on and so on. And that erodes the focus on individual children. Parents that we deal with may themselves be very needy and very demanding. And so we respond to that. A twin-track approach is very uncommon. A twin track where we deal with parents and at the same time we provide something for children. It's happening. Some of the evaluations we've done, in one for substance misuse, there's treatment for parents, and there's a group for children as well at the same time, but it's not common. Often we just miss opportunities to record outcome data about children. Children go in creche, and creche workers watch them carefully. And I've seen beautiful examples of how they put post-it notes on the wall outside for parents to come and see when they pick their children up. Your child did this today. but we never record it. We never record it as practitioners. We never record it as researchers, usually. If practitioners fail to see the child, then what are parents going to do? If the parents don't see the practitioner focusing on what's happening to the child, the parents don't pick up the message that what I'm doing has an impact on a child. They say, I'm doing that better now, so everything's okay. But what happens to the child is what matters. I make beautiful meals and give them to the child. The child doesn't eat them. The impact on the child is nil. And I think finally, as is often the case, the Monroe report held lots of messages for lots of us, sometimes very difficult messages. One of them was, seek the viewpoint of the child. And I think that's just what Daz has been talking about. Seek the viewpoint of the child and record it. So that's really my bugbear. We've got to do better at recording outcomes for children, the impact on children, not just how well we've done in working with parents or what the figures show about the reduction in criminality and so on. We have to do more about impact on children, on individual children. Thank you.